The room shimmered with elegance. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light over the polished oak floors, and jazz music wrapped around the murmurs of over 200 guests. Clinks of champagne glasses, bursts of polite laughter. It was a scene straight out of a magazine. The country club had gone all out for the wedding, and everyone there knew it. I stood quietly by the floral arch, the hem of my satin gown brushing the floor. Most people didn't notice me. That was fine. I'd gotten used to being invisible, the polite shadow beside my husband. Bryson was the groom's cousin, tall, charming, the kind of man who turned heads when he entered a room. He played the role well, handshakes, compliments, that easy smile everyone thought was genuine. But I knew better. I'd memorized the cold behind those eyes, the passive-aggressive comments dressed as jokes, the way his affection dried up the moment we were alone. Tonight, though, I wore confidence like armor. Hair pinned in a sleek bun, a dress he hadn't picked, and heels that clicked with purpose. I wasn't here to play the part anymore. I watched him work the room, laughing too loudly, sipping too quickly. My hands were still, but inside, something had shifted. I didn't know how, or when, but I knew one thing. The mask was slipping. And not just his. My cousin-in-law's toast was winding down when Bryson, flushed with liquor and ego, snatched the microphone. I felt it before it happened. The tension, the way he smirked and turned toward me, like I was the punchline to a joke only he found funny. "And let's give a round of applause to my beautiful wife," he said, raising his glass. "The queen of staying home. Doesn't pay a bill, doesn't lift a finger, but hey, she looks great in a dress." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Some hesitant, some full-throated. I didn't flinch. He sauntered over to me, still holding the mic in one hand, a glass of red wine in the other. "Just a little something to keep you warm," he said, grinning, and tilted the glass. Wine soaked into my dress. Scarlet on cream. The room fell silent. Cameras clicked. A woman gasped. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just looked at him, looked through him. The wet fabric clung to me, the chill setting into my skin. My jaw tightened, not from embarrassment, from clarity. My eyes scanned the room, no one stepped in. Not a single soul said a word. And still, I stood. Not a tear. Just still. I knew this moment would come. I just didn't expect it to be this loud. I thought back, he'd done worse behind closed doors. Glasses thrown, names spat, silence weaponized. This was just the first time he had an audience. But I'd prepared for this. For years, I'd hidden the empire left to me by my father. Shell companies, blind trusts, names not connected to mine. Not revenge, just insurance. Freedom, no one knew, not even him. Still waters run deep. My grandmother used to say that. She was right. I walked off the stage. Slowly, not a single word. My shoes echoed in the silence. A woman I barely knew touched my arm. "Are you okay?" "I will be," I said. "Soon." Whispers filled the room after I left. Some blamed me, said I should have smiled, should have laughed it off. Others looked at Bryson like they were seeing him for the first time. One guest, an older man in a navy blazer, leaned into his tablemate and murmured, "You might want to look her up." Bryson basked in the attention, convinced he'd won something. "She's stuck with me," he told his friends, loud enough for a few others to hear. "Always has been. Always will be." Meanwhile, a young staff member near the bar, barely older than my niece, held her phone low. She'd filmed it all. By the time I reached the valet, a video labeled "Wine Wife" was already climbing views. Back at home, the silence was thicker than the wine that had stained my skin. I didn't confront him. I didn't yell. I just peeled off the dress, folded it over my arm, and walked upstairs. He didn't follow. I sat on the edge of my bed, opened my laptop, and clicked on a folder labeled Phase 1. "You just uncorked the wrong bottle, Bryson," I whispered. I opened a new note and typed the words he'd used, "just a housewife." Then I wrote beneath it, "Let's redefine what that means." I pulled up my legal counsel's contact and began typing, "Activate the contingency plan." One breath in, one breath out. Then I pressed send. When I pulled into the driveway, the porch lights cast long shadows across the stone steps. The house stood still, lit but lifeless. I stepped out, my dress clinging cold and damp to my skin, the stain from the wine now a deep maroon smear across the bodice. My heels clicked against the marble tiles as I stepped inside, but the sound didn't echo, too much silence already filled the space. Bryson's voice drifted from the living room. She stood there like a deer in headlights, he chuckled, talking on speaker. Told you, teach her a lesson in front of the whole damn family. I didn't walk in. I stood just outside the archway, hidden behind the hallway wall. His friend on the other end laughed. You serious, man? You're lucky she didn't slap you. She won't. She never does. Tick tick tick. The grandfather clock near the staircase ticked louder than usual, or maybe I just never noticed how loud time sounded in a house this quiet. That tick, each second, pressed down on my chest like a warning. Bryson kept talking, sipping something. I could hear the ice. I walked upstairs, not saying a word. In our bedroom, I peeled off the gown slowly, as if unwrapping a memory I didn't want to keep. I folded it neatly, slid it into a trash bag, and labeled it with a sticky note, Exhibit A. It wasn't about theatrics. It was about record keeping. I wasn't crying. I was archiving. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in silence, when I remembered what didn't happen tonight. The speech. I was supposed to give a thank you address for the merger honoring my late father's legacy. It was printed in the program. I saw it myself, right under the heading, Closing Remarks. But when the MC announced the next speaker, he skipped right to dessert. I caught Bryson smirking, hands in his pockets, like the whole thing had been one big inside joke. Later, he'd tell me, oh, must have been a typo. Shame. But I saw the way the mic moved hand to hand while my father's portrait hung on the wall, staring at nothing. I could almost hear him say it again. Respect doesn't make noise, but it echoes longer than applause. I used to believe that. Now, it sounded hollow. I picked up my phone and opened the voice memo app. There it was, my draft. I'd recorded it the night before. I pressed play. My own voice, nervous but proud. Thank you all for being here. Tonight marks a new chapter for. Silence. I'd stopped mid-sentence. I didn't press play again. I let the unfinished thought hang in the air. Morning came without sleep, just the hum of early traffic outside and the occasional creak of the walls settling. I walked to my office, no makeup, no mask, and opened my laptop. That's when the email arrived. Subject line. Urgent, you need to see this. From Marie L., New York office. Attached was a forwarded thread, private investor correspondence from a brokerage firm Bryson and I had both worked with during the initial setup of my father's trusts. There it was, in black and white. Once the shift is finalized, she won't even notice until it's done. Her signature's on the old docs already, just need board consent. My stomach turned, but I wasn't surprised. I'd always suspected, but now? Now it was proof, not speculation, not suspicion. I printed the email, highlighted the lines that mattered, and placed the pages into the safe behind my bookshelf. Whoever leaked it wasn't sloppy, they were deliberate. Maybe someone in Bryson's circle had a conscience. Or maybe they just didn't want to go down with him. Either way, the balance of power was no longer imaginary. I stood in the hallway, looking at the family photos. Summer trips, anniversary parties, our wedding, smiles that felt posed now. I used to think they captured real joy. But under each frame, there was always a shadow. There was a picture of me from a beach trip years ago, sunlight on my face, ambition in my eyes. I barely recognized her. I walked back to my desk and deleted every social media post from the last 5 years. Anniversary posts, holiday greetings, vacation highlights, all of it. Gone. Then I opened a journal. The leather cover cracked a little as I pressed it flat. On the first page, I wrote in bold ink. Phase 1, observation. Below it, audit begins. Financial, emotional, reputational. This wasn't revenge. This was alignment. Truth. I wasn't erasing history, I was correcting the record. That night, as the moon rose high, Bryson stumbled into the bedroom smelling of scotch and stale arrogance. He dropped onto the bed beside me, clothes half off, shoes still on. He didn't notice I was awake. He mumbled, everyone saw you for what you are. I stared at the ceiling, lips pressed together. Not yet, Bryson. They saw your stage, not my story. Once his breathing grew heavy with sleep, I reached for my laptop. 2. PI Services, Private Investigations Dallas. Subject. I'm ready. I hit send. A soft ping echoed in the quiet room. And just like that, the real game began. I woke up before the sun had made its way through the blinds. I didn't toss or turn through the night. I didn't need sleep to recharge. I needed clarity, the kind that only comes after the initial sting of betrayal dulls into something sharper focused. The leak was still fresh on my screen. Every line, every phrase, proof of intent. I wasn't going to respond publicly. Bryson thrived on noise, on drama, on spectacle. I'd watched men like him win arguments by dragging people into the dirt and calling it home field. My father used to say, never fight a liar on their stage, build your own. That voice kept me steady. Before the coffee even brewed, I moved our shared account balances, quietly, legally. Nothing too abrupt, just realignment, a shift in weight. At breakfast, Bryson acted like nothing had happened. He buttered his toast, clicked through news on his tablet, then looked up at me with that false charm he wore like a second skin. You good now? Got it all out of your system? He asked, chewing. I smiled. I'm fine. He nodded, satisfied with the illusion that I'd fallen back in line. Every gesture of mine was measured. I sipped slowly. I didn't ask questions. I didn't challenge. That morning, I realized something that made my pulse steady. Control doesn't always shout. Sometimes it waits. Later that morning, I drove to my office downtown. My assistant greeted me, unaware of the storm that had passed, or the one gathering. The place was quiet, as always. It gave me space to think. And today, to investigate. I opened the corporate files I'd asked for, routine audits, nothing suspicious at first glance. Until I saw a signature. Bryson's. Not as a spouse, but as a principal stakeholder in a company I didn't remember ever approving, Redleaf Ventures. The name rang a bell. A charity project? No. I dug deeper. What I found wasn't charity. It was a financial vacuum. Redleaf was a shell. Its name appeared in multiple transfers, money flowing in from my family's legacy investment arm, right into its accounts. Quietly, consistently, over the past year. And there it was, Harold Vance's name. My father's old advisor. A man I'd grown up calling Uncle Harold. Together, they'd built a pipeline straight into the core of everything my father had left me. My hands trembled. Not from fear. Not anymore. I pulled out my phone and took pictures of every document. Front, back, signature pages. Uploaded them to my encrypted cloud. Then, I shredded the originals slowly, watching each slice turn betrayal into confetti. He didn't just humiliate me. He tried to erase me. Back at my desk, I saw a new message come through. No sender name. Just, I know what he's doing. Check folder 9A. It came with a password-protected link. Inside were scanned copies of contracts, dated 6 months ago. My name, my signature. But I hadn't signed any of them. Someone had forged my approval. Harold Vance's name was on the witness line. There was a note. Someone in his circle wants him exposed. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't know who sent it. A regretful accomplice? A whistleblower? Or someone playing both sides? I printed the documents, placed them with the others. Still, I wouldn't act. Not yet. Instead, I called Camille Ortega, an old friend and one of the few people I'd trust with my life, or my estate. We agreed to meet that afternoon, quietly. No firms, just us. Before leaving for the cafe, I slipped on the familiar smile I wore to all board meetings. When I arrived, a few members of the children's charity I co-chaired were already seated. I joined them easily, joked about sleepless nights and marital drama, and they laughed politely. But I was listening to more than the conversation. I watched expressions shift, red glances exchanged when someone mentioned a clip making rounds online, me, drenched in wine, still and silent. Some people just don't know how to handle strong women, one of them said. Another leaned closer. You handled it with grace. That scares men like him. I smiled. My grace wasn't submission. It was strategy. While the others ordered dessert, I opened a blank note in my phone and typed. Grace is power misunderstood. I left the cafe before the conversation could turn back to gossip. That night, back home, I stayed in my office. Bryson didn't bother asking where I was. He assumed I was sulking. He wasn't entirely wrong. I was grieving, but not for the marriage. I was grieving for the version of me who once thought silence was strength without a strategy. Then I heard him on the phone. I pressed the intercom quietly. "Harold, relax," Bryson said. "She's too naive to know where to look." I pressed record. He still didn't get it. I stood by the window, watching the Dallas skyline flicker in the distance, unmoving, bright, clear. He still thinks I'm the quiet one. That's the beauty of underestimation. I drove back to the estate where my childhood summers still seemed to echo in the hallway, but the laughter had faded. That place used to feel like home. Now it felt heavy, layered with history and quiet betrayal. The large veranda gleamed in late afternoon light, but I barely noticed. My mind traveled faster than I could follow, memories flicking by like old slides. My mother and sister greeted me at the door, polite smiles pinned in place, but the air between us was brittle with unsaid things. I caught a glimpse of Krisha's eyes as I entered. She didn't look at me like a sister tonight. She looked at me like a competitor. My mother, Vestra, clasped my hand for a moment and released it too soon. "We're proud of Bryson," she said, voice steady. I nodded. "Yes, we're proud of Bryson." And I stood there wondering, where did I fit in? Inside the dining room, the table was set like every big family event, china fine enough to make you hold your spoon differently. But this time the ritual felt like theater. My seat was between Veggie Lorraine and cousin Gerard, while Bryson sat next to my mother. Over dessert, Vestra said, "Bryson's leadership of the trust is exactly what our family needed, decisiveness." My pulse thudded. I realized I was never consulted. My help in organizing the trust had been quietly sidelined. A cousin leaned toward Krisha and whispered something. Behind the soft clink of utensils, I heard muffled laughter. I excused myself and walked out to the garden. The Texas humidity wrapped itself around me like a cloak of betrayal. I thought, they signed their loyalty years ago, I'm the last to know. In the upstairs library, I stumbled on the wedding album, my father's gift to me. I opened it and turned to the photo of Bryson and me on our wedding day, captioned, "Bryson and Sybil, partners in life and business." Then I found a second copy, same photo, but the caption read, "Bryson and Krisha." My father's handwriting had been overwritten, erased, replaced. I held the album in both hands and felt a chill run through my veins. I remembered what he used to say, in his low voice, "Never let others write your name in gold when you built the foundation in dust." I laid the album on the table and walked out without a word, the weight of the betrayal lodged in my chest. Downstairs, Bryson was on the phone, clearing his throat and speaking to someone in low tones. He glanced at me and asked Vestra flatly, "Has Sybil seen the revised agreement yet?" Krisha offered me a small, cold smile as I walked by. In the kitchen, I poured myself a glass of water, nothing else. I did it deliberately. He saw me. I said, "I'll stay involved, as long as I'm valued." Vestra's smile faltered. The room went quiet. I shifted. I withdrew. My strength from now on would come from action, not from the costume of acquiescence. Inside the car under the old oak tree, I opened my laptop, fingers trembling with readiness. I typed a message to Maeve. "Moving funds out of the trust, starting tonight." I took a deep breath and let the night settle around me. The estate lights glowed dimly as I started the engine. Sometimes the hardest storms begin in your own home. I returned to the penthouse late that evening, silent and precise. The door clicked shut behind me, and the city's hum filtered through the tall windows, Dallas at its quietest, when the night takes over. I carried the weight of the wine stain still etched in my memory, but I looked composed, like someone who had learned how to breathe underwater. On the pillow lay a letter, handwritten, in a familiar scrawl. Bryson had left it for me. I unfolded the page. The first line sounded poetic, almost tender. But I recognized the tone, gaslight disguised as affection. "I did what I had to for us," it read. "Then, you're not yourself lately. You should step down from the board for your own peace." He packaged control like concern. I held the paper against my chest, and the anger didn't rush in, it hovered. I carried it upstairs, paused in the kitchen, and lit a match. He never knew how much I knew. The flames turned those words to ash while I stood calm and in charge. Some endings just don't belong in keepsakes. Morning came with the kind of clarity only sleep can't bring. I sat in the glass-walled study, the city skyline behind me, and lived out exactly what I had rehearsed. I placed a document on the table between us, a proposal dissolving our joint business assets. He leaned back, a smirk playing on his lips. "You'd never risk this empire you helped build," he said recklessly. My hands rested on the table. I said quietly, "Empires built on silence were never mine to begin with." The moment shifted. His laughter faltered. His eyes flickered with fear. That paper wasn't just rules. It was my boundary. I didn't shrink. I extended the space where I stood. Later, in the twilight of the evening, I watched footage from my office cameras, footage I had clicked open myself. There they were, Bryson and Krisha, whispering, swapping documents, erasing signatures that belonged to me. I pressed play and heard, "She'll never find out, it's her blind spot. She still trusts us." My throat clenched, but the anger felt cold and focused. I exported the files, sent them to my attorney, and backed them up. In those silent frames I found truth. In that truth I found leverage. That night I sat by the window, overlooking the skyline. The lights flickered like distant promises, and I wrote in my journal, "I am not at war with them. I am at peace with the version of me who tolerated it too long." I drafted a public letter, not for release yet, titled, "On Ownership, Silence, and Reclamation." I thought about what's said in quiet rooms, "This is not revenge. It's retrieval." I didn't feel bitter anymore. I felt ready. Suddenly, a notification popped up on my phone. Investigation initiated into Redleaf Ventures. Bryson stormed into my office seconds later. He was furious, his pride shredded by an email he hadn't seen coming. I sat still, arms folded, watching his anger boil. He spat out, "You just declared war." I answered calm, even, "No. I simply stopped hiding." I woke to my phone buzzing, 23 missed calls from Maeve, more than 200 unread messages, and not one from Bryson. The living room had gone silent in our penthouse, but the internet was screaming louder than our walls ever had. My heart thudded with a calm urgency. The screen lit up with my name trending. First the headline, "She deserved it?" Then, "Cold Wife Syndrome, the real story." I sat still, wrapped in coffee steam, watching the feed. Photos from the gala, the wine stain, me staying composed while glasses and laughter echoed. A thought flickered. Maybe Krisha or someone in Bryson's circle leaked it. Perfect timing, after the board meeting, just when control felt secure. I let the silence hold. I didn't reply. I didn't post. Because they expected a reaction. Silence told more than clamor. I started listing names in my mind, who watched, who filmed, who leaked. And I knew, they were waiting for me to fall. But I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. I reached out to Lynette, my PR strategist, while the feed kept climbing. She said simply, "They want you emotional. Be surgical instead." We sat through hours of recordings, old photos, files I'd tucked away. The dinner parties, the forced applause, the magazine shot of me, they all resurfaced. The footage of the gala, the wine, the camera flash that chased my humiliation, every element reported, archived. But we didn't react. We prepared. Lynette drafted the first line of a campaign, "Let the facts unfold. Truth has a timeline. So do lies." Tomorrow, Bryson would speak at a live broadcast event. We reserved ad space, strategically placed. I felt no panic, only a cold readiness. The city lights outside the office windows looked steady, unchanged, and it reminded me that storms are inevitable but timing is everything. By late afternoon I sat in a quiet garden cafe, phone off, notebook open. My pen hovered, then wrote, "There's strength in letting people underestimate you." The words felt true. Maeve texted. New edit just went viral. The clip showed not just wine poured, but an excerpt of the gala, Bryson's private joke and Krisha's whispered reaction. Someone out of the shadow flipped the narrative. The hashtag "Let Her Speak" appeared across platforms. My image. No longer just the silent victim, but someone holding the stage. I smiled. The world thought it had seen the end of me. It had no idea I had only begun. Because justice doesn't always knock. Sometimes it trickles. Then it floods. Dinner arrived. I was back at the penthouse thinking about messages flooding in, businesswomen I'd met for board meetings, activists I'd never expected to comment, Even some influencers who once ignored me now posting, writing, "This isn't about wealth. This is about dignity." And I see mine in hers. Another line. Every silent woman at that party owes her voice now. I forwarded those to my legal team, not as ammunition, but as fuel. I realized I was no longer just fighting for myself. I was standing for every woman who ever stayed quiet to keep the peace. At the table, Bryson ate with his usual smug calm, unaware the tide had turned. I sat quietly. I felt the shift inside me, something crisp and clear. Strategy replacing reaction. That night, Lynette arranged a livestream Q&A, broadcast via a respected network. The topic was leadership in philanthropy, my topic. I knew the guidelines: avoid legal talk. So I prepared the line that would land. I don't need to raise my voice to raise a standard. Just before we went live, Maeve burst in with a sealed envelope. She handed it to me under low light, inside, a photograph. Me, Bryson, a third person I never noticed before. My breath caught. I held the envelope closed in my lap. The world would hear my voice in minutes. But the truth, my truth, was still tucked behind that image. If they thought I was quiet, they were mistaken. I wasn't silent. I was strategic. I wasn't powerless. I was preparing. The screen went live. My face appeared calm, controlled. The envelope closed. My final thought before facing the world: the truth was always there. I just needed the right angle. The boardroom felt colder than usual tonight. My heels clicked across the polished floor, but I didn't glance at the portraits lining the wall. I already knew their stories. I walked in with Maeve close behind, her presence quiet, steady. At the head table, Bryson sat, dressed in confidence, as though he owned the room. The lights were muted. The hush held weight. I slipped into my seat among investors I barely knew, but we were all watching the same thing. Maeve passed me a note. "They're making calls. They want you to fold." I nodded. I had heard the first whispers. Men lining up behind their phones, hesitating, pausing. Their loyalty wavered. When warm dinner plates were cleared and the projector flicked on, I stood. I wasn't there to thank them tonight. I asked one question. Who built this company? Silence followed like a held breath. Bryson's eyes flickered. Cretia shifted. The room froze. Within minutes, Mr. Harrington, a senior investor, stood beside me in the darkened row of seats. He leaned in low. "Someone inside told me you hold 45% of the voting shares." I watched his face, calm, stunned. The whisper had become a weapon. Bryson cleared his throat. I interrupted before he could theatrically retake control. "I'll handle the quarterly report. You may resume your wizard act." A slide appeared on the screen. My father's memorandum, the trust document signed by me. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. They weren't ready for this. They didn't know I had waited. Not just for their mistake, but for the moment they revealed their own. The control shifted quietly but irrevocably. When I checked my phone, the tags hit first: "Who built it?" and "Quiet founder no more." I looked at the live stream of the meeting, guests on their phones, clips posted, reactions flooding in. The narrative had flipped. Influencers, businesswomen, even a few journalists picked it up. My face, still composed, appeared alongside messages of solidarity. I caught Bryson's eyes across the room, his arrogance edged with doubt. I leaned back, took a breath. Victory is no longer invisible. The silence behind me had become the signal in front of them. After the meeting, I slipped into the suite above the skyline. I opened the folder titled Phase 2, Public Reset. My PR team waited. They outlined the soft launch video that would highlight my urban revitalization work, completely under my name. I made one call to Bryson's CFO. "Starting next quarter, board minutes go public. Transparency begins now." I said it deliberately. I quoted Maya Angelou, "Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better." It felt right. It felt like truth wagging its own tail. I sat back in my chair, the city lights shimmering behind me. The game had changed. In the lounge, I raised a glass of still water. I tapped gently. "To the ones who think silence is weakness, thank you for underestimating me." I watched the glass and the city. Then I looked at my phone. Maeve had sent one more message: "The legal team is ready." I tapped once. Then I posted quietly: "They heard the silence. Now they'll listen to the outcome." The skyline glowed. The night exhaled. I didn't shout. I didn't rush. I had arrived. I drove through the familiar gravel driveway toward the old estate late that night. The tires crunched softly beneath oak branches, and for a moment I hesitated. This house carried years of change, of hopes and failures. My father's study waited, closed since his passing, coated in dust and memory. The keys in my hand felt heavy as though they knew the weight already. I took a deep breath, opened the door, and stepped into the stillness. The heavy curtains were drawn, the old desk stood untouched, and the quiet pressed in. His voice echoed somewhere. "They'll try to bury you. Just remember, you're the seed." I wasn't here for stories tonight. I was here for truth. For something that had been waiting. I leaned over the oak desk and noticed it, a mirror, slightly misaligned in the molding, something off. My hand found the edge of the frame. A latch clicked. A small safe behind it revealed itself. My birth date reversed gave the code. Inside was an envelope, marked, "For my daughter only," and a small wooden box. My heart sped. I opened the envelope first. The letter inside bore my father's handwriting. Then I lifted the box and found a time-stamped USB drive. I sat down on the window seat, lights low, and plugged the drive into my laptop. The screen flickered to his voice. "Because you see beyond wealth, you build people." I felt tears, but not of sorrow. They were relief. They were validation. I held the envelope close. I realized I'd been invisible long enough. In the letter was the outline of a revised will, 80% of his company's shares directed solely to me, bypassing all male first succession. He'd done it quietly, filed but never published. I listened to him say his reasoning, and I felt a shift in the air. I had the legacy. The assets weren't mine by chance. They were his choice. A morgue of old fights, old humiliations, all pointed to a moment like this. I stood and let the magnitude sink in. I took the papers and placed them in the safe beneath the floorboard he once used. I whispered to the empty room. I finally own what I built without even knowing it. My reflection in the mirror held a woman I didn't recognize once, but she was me. I moved to the center of the room and let memory wash over me. I saw the younger version of myself, ambitious, hopeful, unaware of the quiet war behind the scenes. I thought about all the times I stayed silent. I thought about the times I spoke and everyone ignored me. And I realized tonight that every moment brought me here. I called Maeve and Lynette for a midnight meeting over Zoom. The king is gone. His daughter reigns. We drafted the public disclosure, backed up every document, encrypted files, prepared statements. I felt not just strong, but steady. I slid my journal across the desk and wrote, "This is not revenge. It's retrieval." The skyline lights flickered outside as I closed the blinds and sat in clarity. I returned to the mirror. The frame was now empty where the safe had been. I faced my reflection for a long minute. "He saw me when no one else did," I said. No bitterness, no anger, just a soft realignment of power. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Bryson to announce new family trust division tomorrow. I smiled, calm, knowing. He didn't know what I found. But he was about to. I closed the laptop, stood, and looked at my reflection one last time. The woman in the glass didn't need approval anymore. She was the headline. Let the press conference begin. The morning sun poured into the room like it had something to prove. It didn't flicker. It didn't hide. It just shined, and I let it. I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing down my white blazer. Not a symbol of peace. Not purity. Power. The kind earned, not borrowed. Maeve stood by the side table reading over the final draft. Lynette was already downstairs, making sure every reporter knew which documents would be released and when. I didn't need to rehearse my words. They were mine. They'd lived in me too long to forget now. The crowd outside had grown. I watched them through the high windows. Some were curious. Some were ready to pounce. All were waiting. I walked onto the small platform, cameras pointed like guns, questions loaded behind plastic smiles. I gave them none of what they expected. I said, my silence was never weakness. It was preparation. And then I told the truth, not loud, not flashy. Just steady. I named names without venom. I corrected the narrative without apology. And when I finished, I didn't look back. I didn't wait for applause. I left the room before they could shape what I said into something small. I drove back to the estate alone. The silence was a comfort now. Familiar, not empty. When I pulled into the driveway, they were already there. Bryson leaning on the stone pillar, Victoria pacing like she was waiting for a verdict. I stepped out slowly, papers in hand. Bryson's eyes searched my face. "Why now?" he asked, voice lower than usual. "Why'd you do this to me?" I didn't answer with rage. I handed him the revised will. The letter. The USB copy. "I didn't do anything to you," I said. "I just stopped protecting you from the truth." Victoria's voice cracked. "You think this makes you noble? You just want payback." I shook my head. "I want correction. I want legacy respected. I want my father's voice restored." I watched them shift, first defensive, then hollow. Bryson's shoulders dropped. "I forged the early trust documents. He wasn't supposed to pass that soon." "I didn't mean to, but you did," I cut in. Victoria, quieter now, said, "I never wanted the money. Just the influence." I looked at both of them and said, "Everyone wears armor. Some of us just learn to outgrow it." Then I gave them the offer. "You can stay live here, but you'll sign away all claims to the company. Permanently." The pause that followed wasn't filled with shouting. Just realization. After all the storms, defeat was quiet. Bryson nodded. A slow, aging nod. Victoria stared at the garden, tears welling but unshed. I didn't hug them. I didn't soften it. I turned and walked inside. Later that afternoon, the garden looked different. Maybe because it was full of new life. Children from the scholarship program arrived with wide eyes and shoes too big. The sun was softer now, slipping toward late day. I crouched next to a girl who stood apart from the group, quiet. Watching. "What's your name?" I asked. She whispered it. "They ever tell you you're too quiet?" I asked. She nodded. I smiled. "One day they'll ask you how you did it. Just tell them, by remembering who I am." Maeve brought out coffee. We sat under the old oak tree, just the two of us. No boardroom, no press, no schemes. I didn't speak. Neither did she. Sometimes peace isn't loud. Sometimes it just stops hurting. The phone rang just after sunset. Unknown number. I picked up. A deep voice on the other end said, "Your father had one more secret. Would you like to know?" I looked out over the garden, heart calm but alert. "Go ahead," I said. "I'm listening."